Hi, this is Kara from the Special Needs Mom podcast.
And this is Angela from Especially Organized, Sensible Solutions for Special Needs Moms.
We have this heart for special needs moms. And so we thought, you know what, let's combine forces. And we have come up with what we're calling the Purge Party. And you can pretty much guess what it is. It's a party where we're going to come together and we're going to purge or, in general, accomplish a goal, a small goal together. So we have set this for January 27th, starting at 8 o'clock for my Pacific Coast people.
Which means 11 o'clock for all of you on the East Coast. So this is an opportunity. If you have something on your to-do list that has just been stuck there and you are wanting to move it up on the list, you're wanting to tackle, maybe it's a space or an area of your home or a category in your home that has just needed a little time and attention. This is your opportunity for you to be online with us while you work and have access for us to help you answer your questions, help guide you, and just serve you for those 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can tell like what we've designed is just this very high level of support for that project that you just haven't been able to tackle on your own. The thing that we are envisioning is that you get to leave this purge party feeling so accomplished because you did the thing. You started the year off getting that thing done that you were stuck on last year. And so it's a momentum builder, if you will. You can go ahead and sign up. We have a link ready for you. And we are offering this for $40 for the whole experience.
Absolutely. And we hope you'll join us. I think it's going to be really fun. It's going to be a great group of moms of special needs kids. So we all get each other. We all have an understanding of what it's like to have something on our to-do list, but just we haven't been able to tackle it yet. So I hope that you will join us. We're super excited to bring this to you, and we are thrilled to work with you.
All right. We'll see you all there. Hi, I'm Kara, life coach, wife, and mom to 4 incredible and unique children. It wasn't all that long ago that my son received a diagnosis that had my world come crashing down. I lacked the ability to see past the circumstances, which felt impossible, and the dreams I once had for my life and family felt destroyed. Fast forward past many years of surviving and not at all thriving, and you'll see a mom who trusts that she can handle anything that comes her way and has access to the power and confidence that once felt so lacking. I created the Special Needs Mom podcast to create connection and community with moms who find themselves feeling trapped and with no one who really understands. My intention is to spark the flare of possibility in your own life and rekindle your ability to dream. This isn't a podcast about your special needs child. This is a podcast about you. If you are a mom who feels anxious, alone, or stuck, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Hi, and welcome to the Special Needs Mom podcast. Today we have an activation session with Jodi Clarenfeld, and she is a mom to a 4-year-old little girl who was born at 28 weeks due to some of Jodi's complications with HELLP syndrome and preeclampsia. What you're going to get to hear in this activation session is Jodi learning about a few areas that she wasn't aware of before that really had her being tossed about and had her emotional well-being, specifically her confidence and her guilt and overwhelm, being really, really dependent on how her daughter was performing. And I use that performing word specifically because, as many of us know, we work so hard to help our children thrive. And then what happens is that we tie a little bit of our value or our worth or our success to theirs, which, you know what? It puts a lot of pressure on these kids. And you'll hear in this episode, Jodi exploring some of these areas and really learning about some of the gaps that she didn't see in terms of leaning further into acceptance and also developing the emotional capacity to really feel all the feelings as she watches her daughter struggle. Because as we all know, life is full of struggle and success, pain and sorrow. We as mothers can't do the disservice to our children in trying to avoid the struggle for them. It's such a complex experience to actually think about even allowing or embracing struggle. I think our first instinct as parents is to avoid that and to protect our children. And so without further ado, let's get right into the episode. And I welcome Jodi to her activation session. It's great to have you here.
Thanks so much, Kara, for having me here. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, let's get to know you a little bit. So why don't you tell me just briefly about how you find yourself in life?
I find myself, I guess, in a pretty good place. I'm not going to complain. I think there are a lot of people out there in the world who have worse things going on. I am happily married for 6 years to a wonderful man who could be an empty nester, but decided to go on this merry-go-round of being a parent with me again, since I'm his second wife. He has 3 boys from his first marriage, and together we have a 4-year-old daughter. As a result of her birth, I started a new business called Flourish, which is designed to educate, empower, and support preemie and NICU families on their journeys through the NICU and beyond. And personally, aside from this, I also run my family's business, which is a wholesale medical product distribution company. But after my daughter was born, I found that that was no longer my passion. And though I still run it, teaching advocacy and working with other parents to get them the help for their children has really become a passion of mine and something that I want to continue doing.
I think that makes a lot of sense. It makes a ton of sense. And it's great to see you have really kind of ignited passions as a result of the mom that you are.
Yeah, I think in a situation such as mine, it has also been very cathartic and healing for me to help others. Because when you give birth to a child unexpectedly or so early, or if you give birth to a child and they're whisked out of your arms and sent to the NICU for whatever the reason, if they're full term, there's definite trauma there. You kind of stuff that trauma down deep and you don't necessarily deal with it in the moment because you're in fight or flight for your child or for the situation that you're in. Yet it can be very isolating and also kind of detrimental to your own health to not deal with those feelings and emotions.
Yeah, definitely. Talk about, the different stages of what I now call the evolution of a special needs mom. And I think that first stage, that stage 1 is that sun survival where it's just like exactly what you've described. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit of background, kind of some context as we continue the conversation. The areas that you have shared with me that you're really looking to shift is having more confidence, being less overwhelmed, and reducing your guilt. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your answer to this question. In 6 months, if everything went your way in these 3 areas, what do you wish for? What do you hope would be?
I would hope that if all those areas were fulfilled for myself and for my family, that I would be able to spread the wealth and help others get to the same point in their journey. I think as a special needs mom or as a mom, I like to call it as a mom whose child needs extra love and support. It can be very difficult and again, also isolating when your child doesn't necessarily check the box. And most people don't check the box, but as a society, we're told that you should. And I would hope that I'd be able to shed light in a greater understanding of that. And as much as I personally know that, sometimes as it relates to me or to my child or my family, something gets disconnected in my own head. Whereas I can help others see that, but I can't internalize that for myself.
And which is the part that you feel like you have the hardest time personally experiencing, even though you can see it for somebody else?
I think the hardest thing is when I either read reports or when someone is telling me something that's particularly challenging, or maybe where my daughter is not up to, I'll say, standard or par, if you will. And I know how hard she works every single day and always with a smile on her face and how happy she is. And I know how far she has come since the day she's born. But that said, I somehow feel that those comments or those words that I read are a reflection on me and
Mm.
my job as a parent.
Wow. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. That makes a lot of sense. How it would be a very different experience seeing another parent struggling, and you can see all of it because you don't have that narrative. You don't have it sounds like blame. And so the guilt makes a little bit of sense now. Blame for your daughter either producing or not producing, we'll call them results. Yeah, I think it's really common to have parents attach their worth to what their child is doing or not doing, which if everything's going great, that could be great. You could feel real awesome. But it can easily go the other way.
People can also just be mean about it,
Hmm.
right?
I mean, yeah.
In terms of saying, well, oh, that's where your child needs to go to school, or oh, that's the kind of help you need, as opposed to being welcoming and saying how great it is that you have the opportunity to provide such support for your child. It's looked at more negatively. And I think sometimes for me too, that I get hung up on that as well.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. So going back to kind of the areas, more confidence. So tell me a little bit actually about when you experience not having the confidence that you want.
Well, I can think of one thing right off the bat in particular. It must have been when my daughter was about 5 months old. And granted, like I said, she was born 12 weeks early, so she was tiny to begin with. And I was walking on the street with my daughter, strolling her along, and our baby nurse. And I'm sure you had an experience, when your children were younger, random people on the street. Oh, such a pretty baby, so adorable. How old? Things of the like. So someone asked that, and I said, oh, well, she's about 5 months. And the woman said to me, are you sure? Are you feeding her? She's so small. And it took every ounce of strength that
Mm.
I had in my body, which at that point, I was still healing from my own situation. And I wasn't confident enough in my birth story and our journey not to cry or crumble to the street. Our baby nurse, who's an amazing woman, grabbed me by the back and said, ma'am, she is as old as she is supposed to be. And we turned the corner and walked away. And I learned such a valuable lesson in that this person didn't even know me, know my story, yet I let it affect me so much. And from then on in, I try to not let what other people say to my face get me so down and feeling so negative. I think as parents, when you think of your birth story, you don't think of your child being born so earlier, or your child being born in the NICU, or you both fighting for your lives. I think we typically picture what you see on TV, which is generally the baby cries, they get put on your chest, and everything is wonderful. And I was still healing, and I was so fragile and feeling so badly about myself and our birth story at the time that I allowed every single thing to trigger me and make me lose my confidence more and more.
So you become aware of this now. I hear you saying like, hey, I'm allowing my confidence to get shattered by these outside things. And it sounds like you still see some areas for growth for you. So kind of going back to that question I asked in the beginning, when you think about confidence and having more confidence, fast forward 6 months from now, if you continue the growth that you've already had, what do you see would shift for you or would be different than it is now?
I think I'd have a thicker skin. I'm constantly trying to tell myself that and to cut myself some slack. You know, when we look at growth, it should be progress, not perfection. And when I look at overall progress, that's amazing. But sometimes still, I get hung up in those milestones or those benchmarks just the way anybody else would. When I ask myself all the time to not let it bother me, it's hard because that's asking me to also be perfect. And that's hard to do. And also, again, it's more of that surrendering to the process of growing and learning on a daily basis about yourself, about your spouse, about your child. And for someone who's type A, woman, it's hard to do.
I think the type A's, and actually I think many of my audience are. And there's this part about, if I refer back to the evolution of the special needs mom, in that stage 2, you're stable, but you're self-sacrificing everything to give it to your child. And there's a piece there that for most of the people that I work with, they've pretty much been able to do anything they wanted in their life. And this is the thing that they can't outsmart, outrun, or outwork it. That starts to really wear them down. And it sounds like to some degree you might resonate with that, given what you're sharing about, you working so hard to support your daughter, you seeing your daughter doing all the right things and still not having, as I said, the results in quotes that you might be looking for.
Yes, you hit the nail on the head completely, right? I mean, you sacrifice everything for your child, yet, and you see it yourself. But when someone says that one thing that might be a trigger for you, even though you've taken 2 steps forward, you still might take then a step back. And I just always have to reinforce to myself or remind myself that that's okay, that's life, and try and not take it so personally. But at the end of the day, when someone says something, especially about your child, it is so hard not to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, I feel like it's almost the experience that it's happening to you in terms of if you see your child struggling with something. I think we as mothers are so deeply connected. And I think some of this can go into unhealth, but I think in general, I think it's because mothers' hearts are so connected to their children that it feels almost as if we're experiencing the hurt that they're experiencing. Jumping over to, so we've been talking about confidence. You also mentioned about overwhelm. In regards to overwhelm, what's your current experience?
Right now, I think I'm in an okay place, but I know I'm about to be overwhelmed. I don't know if that makes any sense or not. Again, being where my daughter is, I'm trying to think ahead to the next step so that I can get out ahead of it as much as I can. And that next step for us is undergoing a series of evaluations for her for when she gets to kindergarten. And what does that look like? So we are about to embark on that journey of all those tests and reports and discussions. And so I know in the coming months, in the not so distant future, I will be feeling much more overwhelmed than I am at this very moment. But like I said, I'm trying to get out ahead of it and just also journal my feelings and understand so that I can look back in a few months' time.
Awesome. I love that you're proactively anticipating this. You're very advanced.
I think as a NICU mom, it's just one of those things that I've always had to do. Not necessarily that I've wanted to, it's just that I've had to. And while I'm enjoying every moment, I also remember to focus on what's coming next so that I can prepare her. But first, I have to prepare myself. So I kind of have always looked at my daughter under a microscope. I sometimes wish that I don't, and that I could step back a little bit. For now, this is just the role that I'm playing so that I can set her up for success and help her continue loving school and being with her friends as she does right now.
Yeah. Okay. Again, looping back to the same questions, the overwhelm. You kind of anticipate it will be very easy for you to go into overwhelm. So you're kind of trying to proactively anticipate it. If it could go any way you want it to go in 6 months in regards to what we'll call the testing gauntlet, preparing your daughter for kindergarten, how would you want it to go?
I'm not really sure because I don't really know what to expect of the process. I think the thing that I would want most for Jenna to have fun playing or being with this person who we have chosen to help evaluate her. I would want her to enjoy those days worth of testing as opposed to not enjoying it or kind of whining and complaining. That for me right now is what I would consider the best scenario and the best outcome.
And if your daughter is enjoying that play and having that outcome, what do you get to experience?
Then I get to see her be happy. And I'll put it this way. So right now we see a developmental pediatrician. And during those evaluations, when I see the doctor ask her things that I know she can answer and has answered, but can't in that moment, it is so hard to not want to feed her those answers or give her a hint or a clue. Or to your point, watch your child struggle.
Yeah.
Because I struggle when she struggles. So if she's having fun and doing everything as she's supposed to, or not pausing per se, or not grappling with or being challenged to find either the words or the motions or whatever is asked of her, then I'm happy and I'm not struggling. So that would be wonderful for me.
Yeah. And going deeper into the idea, you see the hope of her enjoying these tests, then you see her happy. What's the experience that you get if you look at her and she's happy?
I just feel all lit up inside that she's being like a kid, like any other kid. And that's another thing that I want for her. I think, again, right now at this point in her life, she doesn't fully know either her birth story or that she could be perceived as a little bit different. And my wish for her is to always be as happy as she is now and not feel those feelings as she gets older.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing and allowing yourself to look down the road and to see what's possible and to see what kind of you are anticipating and answering the question of like, what would you hope for 6 months from now? And I want to move on to use the evolution of the special needs mom kind of roadmap that I've created just to, place you in there to kind of look at, well, what some of the steps to move forward might be. What's standing out to me as you're sharing is really what I call if-when thinking. And you kind of mentioned earlier, even when you were talking about like the tests and like the reading of the reports, that like what happens for you is that you read the comments and you internalize them, and then you consider that they're a reflection of you. And then we even talked later on about how, it's great when your child's doing great, you can feel great, but then if they're not, it really does hold you hostage. it's almost like the visualization, I think, is the most powerful. Is it's like you're a boat in the ocean. And, if there's waves, you're getting tossed about. If it's calm, you're calm. But it ends up being a very powerless position because just like the weather, you actually can't control the outcomes of your daughter. You can't control what happens on those reports. And my guess is that you want to be happy regardless of how your daughter's doing. And I want to clarify that a little bit, because obviously you want your daughter to be happy. Every mother wants that for your child. And what we know about human beings is they're not always happy. They struggle. We all do. And attaching your happiness to that is probably not going to be the most empowering for her. Actually puts a lot of pressure on her because she always has to perform for mom to be happy. And so this is a very stabilized yet self-sacrificing place. Kind of stage 2, you probably late stage 2, early stage 3, where you move on to pushing against that and saying, wait, this kind of leads me to be a little bit unbalanced, to overemphasize what she's doing and to underemphasize my responsibility to generate my own feelings, which you have definitely referred to in the conversation of recognizing that just because somebody says something to you doesn't mean that you have to kind of go down with that ship. Any questions or thoughts as I reflect back this piece of this if-when thinking that I'm summarizing for you?
No, it sounds like you're spot on completely. I kind of describe it to people as being thrown in the deep end of a pool, not knowing how to swim and without a life jacket. So it's very similar, our analogies, and treading water. And what do you do? How long do you have to do that for? So yes, I definitely see where I fit into that spectrum of your stages for sure. And I wish for myself that I didn't take it personally. And like I said, I can do it for other people. It's just hard when it's yourself.
Yes, it's so much harder when it's ourselves. It's all the things, right? It's like actually my editor sometimes encourages me to take a break because she's like, so by the way, you need to take a break too. I'm like, okay, you're right. You're right. And I listen to her, but admittedly, sometimes it's really hard. It's like I expect myself to push through, even when I would look at somebody else and be like, by all means, let's go take a rest. So yes, we do have this habit as humans and moms of having a double standard. So looking at this piece of the if-when thinking, the opportunity I see for you is to really notice how that is impacting you and probably really producing a lot of the guilt that you've referenced, certainly taking away your confidence. Because if you can only be confident that you're doing all the right things for your daughter, if she's producing the results, then it's very predictable that your daughter's not going to ace every test that she ever takes. And so it would be very hard for you to have the confidence that you would want. And really, again, going back to the reference of like this boat in the ocean that's just getting tossed about, depending on what's going on around it. So the waves would be what I would call the circumstances, things that you truly don't have control of. My guess is you had zero control about your daughter being born premature. You had zero control of all the medical interventions that she needed, and you will have zero control over some of the things that she will need in the future. Those being the circumstances, acknowledging and accepting that we cannot change those. That's a huge piece I would see for you, is really accepting, moving towards the acceptance of where she is now. And acceptance is letting it be without judgment. And this would be for your daughter and for yourself. And the judgment I would see you being tempted to make is that if she struggles on, let's just say, this test that you're referring to, maybe she hates the test. That your fear is that if she has a bad day, then she won't be happy. And then she's not happy, then you're not happy. So the opportunity is to take your boat ashore, is to stop actually letting it be tossed about by the circumstances and taking the boat ashore to where you aren't tossed about by the circumstances. You actually are stable. You've stabilized yourself. And as I mentioned a second ago, it starts with acceptance. And then the acceptance is that you are responsible for teaching your child, but you're not responsible for her results. And when we collapse the two, you see how complex it gets.
Yes.
But by separating out and actually allowing yourself to be the best mom regardless of what she does or doesn't do. That's the opportunity. What are your thoughts on that?
You're absolutely right. Because if I could stable myself and have both feet on the ground, so to speak, I wouldn't as easily be pushed around by whatever's thrown at me. Again, like I said, it's hard when someone is saying to you, like, I know it cognitively. I know it. It's just there's somehow a disconnect. And I think that for me is so frustrating. I think to myself, I should know this already. I should be able to do this already. But somehow, when I get these reports, now granted, I'm much better than I originally was. I used to cry and all these other things. That said, I feel like I know this is what these reports are about, right? I know what it's going to say, or I'm not even surprised at what they say. I guess it's more real or something that is disconnected. And I accept and love my daughter for who she is. And I'm so proud of her and everything that she does. And I don't weigh her, what she does or doesn't do, on the same scale that I demand of myself. Right. So I at least feel that I don't put that pressure on her. It's more I put that pressure on myself for her. I feel like I take that on. Does that make sense what I'm
saying? It makes a
ton
of sense. Yeah. No, I want to comment on a couple things. Firstly, the last thing you said is that you don't put the pressure on her intentionally. You put the pressure on yourself. However, these little kids, they're watching. And they're smart. So much smarter. And smart is not even the right word, but like they pick up on what is not spoken. And this is something I'm acutely aware of because I see the areas that I struggle and I see them coming out in my children. And it's never been something I've intentionally taught them. And it's hard. So yeah, I just want to comment like, yeah, you're not trying to put the pressure on her, but guess who's going to feel the pressure? And then the thing that you mentioned about like, this cognitively, but there's a disconnect. That is so classic, like phase 2, like you're so like perfectly in phase 2, because it's almost like what you had to do to survive to get from stage 1 and then to kind of really be solid in stage 2 is you had to shut off all those emotions. You had to shut off everything to survive and to get through what you've gotten through. And now everything's kind of starting to come back online. It probably has been for a while for you. And my guess is that you haven't had to deal with this big of feelings before, maybe in other areas of your life, but I find that it touches on a very tender spot when it has to do with our children. And so my guess is that the potential feelings that you think you might have to feel in supporting your daughter, you don't yet have the skills to really process them. So that's why we see this cognitive ability for you to be able to see what's happening, and you have an ability to explain it, but the disconnect actually in your mind and body. Like your body hasn't been allowed to experience it because your brain's so busy trying to protect you and trying to figure out how not to feel it. So really, as moving through the evolution stages, like the ability to identify and to feel and to process these, what I call big emotions, they don't have to be big as in they take a lot of time, but they often feel very overwhelming or scary or just, things that we kind of would always work to avoid feeling. So does that resonate with you at all in terms of kind of the cognitive knowing, but actually having this experience of disconnect?
Yes, certainly. I think, to your point, right? The body does what it can to shield and protect oneself. I thought that I guess I had accepted a lot of the feelings and emotions, but in listening to you, I guess I haven't, which is great for me to know and something that I can learn to work on. And I agree with you also that, kids are very intuitive and they pick up on things. So even though I'm not necessarily saying things, actions speak louder than words. But I also like to feel that my daughter is just so loved and so well, well taken care of is the wrong way to say it, but just so well
Nurture.
loved. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
That kind of helps in the process, though I'm sure you would say that doesn't. But
Well, I would say that love is very powerful. So it can cover for a lot of things. So I certainly can acknowledge that. Yeah, go ahead. You were going to.
but again, I think I started this conversation by saying it's life's work to always be working on yourself and learning and growing. And having this conversation has been wonderful for me because I have learned in just this short time period how I can better help myself and in turn be a better mother, spouse, friend, everything, because I believe all these things impact every aspect of your life.
Yeah.
So it's like a trickle down theory. If I can be better in one area, it'll just help everything else that much more.
Yeah. There's certainly a ripple effect in coaching that we see. You work on one relationship and turns out all of your relationships are impacted. I want to say something to you. You said, I thought I had accepted, and now I'm kind of questioning that. It's very likely that you have done a lot of work in acceptance and you've come so far. And so I don't want you to discredit all the work that you've already done and how far you've gotten. But I think to your point is it's really valuable though, when you can see what you kind of didn't see before. And it just looks like, hey, there's a little parts of acceptance, or there maybe is this attachment to your child having to do something that you just didn't know about. And now you know about it. And so now you have the opportunity to do something about it, which I think is the biggest gift of all. And so the things that I would offer you to work on and to really lean into is firstly acceptance. Really, really, really looking at what you are trying to fix or change about your daughter. And maybe you wouldn't use those words, but you mentioned you journal. So maybe journaling about those things and asking yourself, what am I trying to fix or change about my daughter? What am I afraid that she will do or won't do? And just allowing yourself to explore it again without judgment, like really bringing this curiosity into it, recognizing that this doesn't mean that you think anything less of your daughter. It actually just means that you're going to explore and have an honest conversation with yourself. The second thing would be to lean into actually feeling the feelings. And, this is an area where, I'm constantly annoyed because I'm like, I already figured out how to do that. I already learned it. As like different people are telling me I need to do this. And it's one of those areas where I think it's something that even if we have done it and learned about it and have been intentional about it, I think there's always room to grow. There's always room to recognize if there are certain feelings that we kind of avoid, or just certain, even things maybe from the past, like you mentioned the trauma, like maybe there's some areas that you haven't gotten to yet. And so wherever you're starting, I think that there's always growth opportunities. And what I'll do is I'll give you some resources to be able to really lean into the feelings. And so I'll follow up with you on email. Yeah, those are the two things that I would really invite you to focus on to kind of continue moving along the process and your continual growth and evolution.
Thank you very much. And thank you for also acknowledging where I've come from, right? It's not an all or nothing situation, right?
Yeah.
It's, to your point, in evolution, right? We're always on some continuum growing and learning. So I just want to say thank you for that, because it's very easy to get upset with yourself and say, oh gosh, I can't believe I didn't do that. Now I have to start from like square one, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so thank you for that. And also just for your direction, because we all need help, right? Even coaches have coaches, or like therapists have therapists. No one is above being helped, and no one cannot do better. And to even listen and internalize what I think I'm not doing still affects my child is super important to me, because I really wouldn't want her to feel that pressure. So I will certainly take that as a huge takeaway.
So glad to hear that. And I think that's a good place to wrap up. And as I mentioned, I will follow up with you so that you do have a nice little next step in terms of being able to apply this even to a higher degree. Are there any things that you would ask in terms of questions as we wrap up, or anything you want to share in terms of what you're taking from this call beyond what you've already shared?
I really just wanted to thank you for the opportunity and having me on and go on even a deeper dive of myself than I thought that I had already done. We're always learning about ourselves, and I really learned a whole bunch about myself and my journey and Jenna's journey and my family today because of your questions and because of your insights. So I just want to thank you.
Oh gosh, it's my pleasure. And it's so good to be with you today. All right.
Thank you.
One more thing before we officially wrap up this show. Sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, I have the experience of wanting more. I'm listening at the very end thinking, I sure wish that episode didn't end. I invite you, if you feel in any way the same way, I invite you to the Special Needs Mom podcast community, which is a free group that I host on Facebook, where we as a community of fellow moms who listen to this podcast and are experiencing life in similar shoes, get to talk to one another, get to share stories, get to actually interact. I hope you'll consider joining. See you over there.